Thank you so much. For you as small and mid-sized business leaders to make smart decisions, mitigate risk, and capitalize on opportunities, it's critical that you stay on top of key economic trends that impact different areas of your business. In today's session, based on our latest research from Vistage, you'll learn recommended actions for planning for 2020. Today, I am joined by Joe Galvin, the Chief Research Officer for Vistage Worldwide. And our role as the Vistage research team is to provide small and mid-sized business leaders and our members with the most current, compelling, and actionable research, data, and perspectives to guide their decision making. So Joe, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Ann. We entered 2019, and this comes from our projections 2019 report, with this concept of confidence with caution, meaning our members were confident and are confident in their business, their ability to grow, and that showed up in terms of revenue, profit growth, as well as investments, increasing investments in employees. But there was caution out there, and that caution was driven by some of the forces that they had seen building in the second half of 2018. Our most recent study published just in the last couple of weeks with September data, our Q3 confidence index, shows that from a high of 7 quarters ago, we've now fallen to a point of 7 consecutive quarters where we see our confidence in the overall confidence of our community decaying. And this is a result of a variety of factors. But what's proven to be consistent is the opinion data that we get from our members, and this is the voice of CEOs. You'll see we had 1,518 contribute to the study this quarter. What we know about the data we get from our members is it's their feeling. It's fuzzy data. But we know that fuzzy data measured consistently is directionally accurate. And that's why the confidence index is so important. Because you'll see in this chart, the confidence index going back to 2003 when we started doing this, and this work is done by Dr. Richard Curtin out of the University of Michigan. Going back to 2003, the red line is our confidence index over time. What's interesting are the blue dots are the corresponding GDP, gross domestic product, over that same time frame. And what you'll notice is in a 3 to 6 to 9 month kind of window, if you were to slide the red chart over, you would see that it tracks very, very closely with GDP. So what our members think, how they feel about the economy and their opportunity in the economy is a key indicator of the direction of where GDP will go. Now you notice here over the last couple of years, you see a gap there, and that's well, GDP doesn't move as fast as opinion does, but that's a result of the enthusiasm that came out of the 2016 election under the belief that there would be a pro-business environment, that you would see regulations rolled back that would make it easier for business to do business, and the anticipated tax cut. That second peak you see is that tax cut. And combined with the energy of the tax cut and the increase in spending on the government, we saw just a real positive environment. Since then, it's changed. And you'll see that we're now, if you look at the red line, you'll see that it's just the 4th business cycle since the Great Recession. We kind of use that as the bookend. But this is just another business cycle. We are clearly on the backside of the business cycle. What's interesting is when we plot this, we'll see that of the four business cycles that we've seen since the Great Recession, we're just in the 4th one. Now, our friends at ITR would suggest that we'll continue to see the economy struggle through mid-year next year, that we've got another 6 to 9 months of downside pressure until we reach the bottom and we come back up, and that by this time, October of 2020, we'll begin in the A phase, or the initial phase, growth phase of the next business cycle. So a slowdown, yes, a recession, no. And I call your attention to this, is that if we look back to a similar data point, Q3 2007, right before, in fact, we did plunge into the Great Recession. It's a very different environment today. In 2007, if you lost your job, you were out of work for 3, 6, 18 months. And then you came in 2 or 3 levels different, right? In 2007, people were losing their houses, and we had the mortgage crisis. And now the economy was staring down the abyss of a meltdown. We don't have any of those factors today. In fact, today, what we have is what I call peak employment, meaning there are more jobs than people, and there's no reason to believe that's going to change over time. That the growth of our businesses and the growth of our economy is predicated on the ability to have workers to fuel that growth, and we'll continue to see that. So it's very different now. In fact, the pressure has shifted from the employee of 2007 to the employer, to the boss in 2019, because your employees have options. Unlike in 2007, they clung to their job and they clung to their bank accounts. In 2019, there's confidence in the consumers. No one's losing their jobs. They're going and they're spending, and they feel comfortable about their job prospects in the future, because if they don't like the company they work for, if they're not comfortable with that environment, they have options. Their phones are ringing because everybody is looking to hire. We'll continue to see a number of increase in hires, but those that aren't hiring are hiring to replace the people that they lose. And that's why the pressure on growth is driven by the absence of talent. So my point here is that I believe that we are already in a slowdown. We'll continue to see that slowdown go through the middle of next year, but that we're not facing a recession, and that we need to begin to think about what we want to do to prepare for that next upswing of the next business cycle. And that's what sets us up. Welcome to Decision Factors 2019. This is a document that we put out every year around the middle of the year. We like to look at what are the key trends, what are the big drivers, what are the considerations that CEOs need to think about as they're making decisions as they go into 2019 and beyond. We know that CEOs are in the business of making decisions, and much of what we do is to help you make better decisions, by refining those instincts, improving your judgment, and expanding perspectives. We've done this document 2 other times, and we'll continue and look forward to doing it next year. It's just a way to create a thought process, support it with data. We bring in some of the experts in the world that we work with to help CEOs of small and mid-sized businesses understand those external forces that are affecting their business. We like to think that Vistage research creates a layer of business insight that sits beneath the noise of the internet, but above some of the deep subject matter expertise and experts that we rely on for our research, as well as that appear in our Vistage meetings. So let's step forward. Our first topic, our first consideration is confidence with caution. We came into 2019 with the confidence with caution theme. We wanted to come in, and this was a result of, again, the confidence that existed with our members, but the caution. And now what we see are the dark clouds are getting darker. And what I mean by that is that since the start of the year, we only see more signs that the economy is slowing. And we see that reflection in our members and what that is. And I'd like to ask Ann to come in and share with us a deeper dive into how we get to our confidence index and really what that means.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. So, confidence with caution. So we saw that the overall index fell for 7 consecutive quarters, but that index is actually compiled of 6 different factors. And so let's look at those to see where the confidence is and where the caution is. As Joe mentioned, really, let's start with where our CEOs are cautious, and that's surrounding their sentiment about the economy. So the first set of factors that comprise the index is looking back and looking forward. And we see 21% said the economy recently improved, and this is down 10 points from last quarter. So CEO sentiment about the economy, where it's been and where it's going is what's really driving that index down. And 39% expect the economy to worsen in the year ahead. Just 12% expect improved conditions. So this is really where we're seeing a lot of caution. There's not a lot of optimism surrounding the economy. But then when we transition to the next set of factors, and that's prospects about their business, it's where we start to see some of the confidence come back. So 61% expect increased revenues in the year ahead, and a little later we'll share some other context to that. That's where we see some optimism. 61%, so nearly 2/3 are expecting increased revenues, with 51% expecting increased profits. And we expect that gap because of the rising cost of everything. Many of our members are impacted by tariffs. We know that many CEOs, many companies are raising wages to be able to be more competitive. So that gap between revenues and profitability, makes sense, but still showing over half expect increased profits. Then the last set of measures that comprise the index are expansion plans in terms of fixed investments and workforce expansion. Now, where we start to see getting a little softer, 37% still plan to increase investment expenditures. And while this is the lowest in 7 years, we also know that looking back that there's been a steady increase in fixed investments. So when you look at an increase on top of an increase, there's still some optimism, there's still some spending. And with the attractive interest rates that we're seeing right now, that's something that CEOs can capitalize on. But where we see the most confidence is the 57% of CEOs that plan to expand their workforce. And as Joe mentioned, that we're at a nearly full employment economy. And this figure is expansion. This is adding net personnel to workforce versus just hiring. We know that nearly everyone is hiring, but 57% are planning to expand. And that is one factor that's actually increased from last quarter. So when you look at the fact that 61% are expecting increased revenues, well, the way that they are going to support that growth is by expanding their workforce. So those are two things that connect together, and that's really, gives you some nuance to our headline of confidence with caution.
Well, Ann, what's interesting about this too is when you look at the 57% are going to expand their workforce, the balance of the other 43%, they have to protect and defend the people that they're losing. The
Mm-hmm.
voluntary quit rate in organizations is one of the data points that is beginning to peak as people have options and they are looking to go to places that are more aligned and connected with what they value, both in terms of their job career, but also what they're doing in the work they're doing. So this really becomes, as you said, one of the strong indicators of the confidence that exists in the world and the hard reality that it's really hard to find talent and it's hard to keep talent. So great, thank you. Let's step forward because the next element is what we call uncertainty is the new normal. And this is driven by some of the changes and some of the just uncertainty that exists with some of the trade and tariff policies. In fact, I think about tariffs and I think about them as it's a Mr. Miyagi tariff strategy of tariffs on, tariffs off, tariffs on, tariffs off. This uncertainty that's generated by some of the very quick and unpredictable changes in trade and tariff creates a difficult environment. It's why we've added a third C to our confidence with caution. We've added confusion. And it's confusion because this absence of clarity or predictability as to what next creates uncertainty. And it's as hard as it is to make decisions, and we believe that CEOs are in the business of making decisions. As hard as it is to make decisions, this just makes it that much harder. This just makes it that much harder. And it's almost impossible to do strategic planning, which affects the CEO's ability to execute. So to help sort this out, we took a select group of Vistage chairs and members to Washington, D.C. late June and spent a day with the United States Chamber of Commerce. This report is available only for Vistage members. It's not shared beyond the Vistage community. But we spent a day with the top analysts from the USCC. Their office is literally across the street from the White House. And we had chairs and members representing our community, both in terms of listening and learning from their folks, but also sharing our point of view. Mark Taylor was there, and Mark Taylor as a chair has got 74 CEO members, and he's speaking for those members. So it was a really powerful session, and we learned some things. It's captured in this report, but it started with taxes. The comment was that in a house divided, you won't have major tax change. So unless or until one party or another gets control of all three branches of the government, you won't see a substantial tax change. And that means for some of the unpopular regulations, like for the people that live on the coast, the cap on state and local taxes is not going to go away. There'll be some regulations twisting, but by and large, taxes are set. Where we get to interesting and uncertainty is in trade. There's a push now and a hope that the USMCA, which is an updated version of NAFTA. NAFTA was originally written in 1994. That's before Amazon, Twitter, Facebook, all these fun things that we use every day. So it needs to be updated, and there's hope that that can be done. There's tremendous uncertainty with China and the type of trade that we're dealing with them, and it's more than just trade. There's a whole list of issues with China, including geopolitical issues, information technology issues, information sharing issues, cyber and cybersecurity issues that all need to be worked out. The abandonment of the Trans-Pacific Partnership is another example of how our ability to influence and exert pressure is challenged. And then you throw in what's going on with Brexit and Europe and how those trade deals are going to have to be redone. It creates tremendous uncertainty for those businesses who deal in international trade, but also for all of us as consumers, because all of this uncertainty is all adding to cost in the everyday things that we buy in our lives as consumers. And that leads us to tariffs. It's a new tariff on or off. It's Mr. Miyagi, tariffs on, tariffs off. We just recently, tariffs was put on European goods. That's going to start affecting things like cheese and wine and stuff like that. Tariffs were placed on Turkey for a week and then taken off. So this uncertainty creates this confusion. It makes decision making hard. The one concept and the one thing that we hope everybody can agree on is the importance of infrastructure. And it's infrastructure not just in terms of our bridges, our airports, our railroads, our schools, all those physical things. It's also our digital infrastructure. Our digital infrastructure needs to be updated. It needs to be addressed. Things like 5G will change the speed and volume, like going from a garden hose to a fire hose. We just heard about quantum computing and the breakthrough at Google. That will radically change the speed and the volume of data that can be changed or that can be studied. And then, of course, artificial intelligence capturing on the computational ability to process all that data. Our digital infrastructure needs to be rebuilt, reinvested, and reintegrated into the world. So maybe that's something we can all agree on. But anyway, it was a fascinating day. We actually had a chance to go over to the Capitol, and we met with representatives from both the Trump administration and a high-level staff person from Mitch McConnell's office, which was really interesting. And as I said, this report is available for Vistage members, but it helps, again, set the table for the considerations that we have to bear in mind when we think about specifically trade, tariff, and the impact of infrastructure. You know, infrastructure is so critical to the small and mid-sized business person because our businesses operate on top of that infrastructure that allows the movement of goods and services and money and all the things that happen. So this is something that we feel we need to get behind and encourage. But again, in today's political environment, it's not sure what can or will happen. But these are all initiatives that in mid-year, at least USCC advised us in this way. So that's our second decision factor, accept the fact that uncertainty is the new normal. So let's step forward now and look at our third topic, which is talent management. As we've mentioned a couple of times, and I would reiterate that the talent shortage is the single greatest threat we have to our growth. Our humans, our businesses, in order to flourish and to capitalize on the markets and the opportunities that are available, require more people. And that's why we identified talent management and your ability to attract the people you have, or to retain the people you have and attract the people you want is so important. So Ann, help us with this.
Yeah, so each year in our confidence index in December, we ask our members, what are the major decisions you're going to have to face regarding your business in 2019? So now, almost a year ago, looking back at these topics, hiring, recruitment, and sourcing topped that list. And Joe talked about growth, and not far behind that is market development. So these are some of the insights that we share each year in our CEO projections for 2019 report. We don't really have any view that the top priorities will move off of talent because that's going to continue to be critical. But what we do see is that there is a shift away from maybe hiring and recruitment being the biggest priority to retention being a big focus, because with a full labor market, most of your employees are at risk. And if you're trying to expand, you need to stop the outflow. So we did ask, as a follow-up to this question that we ask every year in our Q3 survey, what's your biggest priority? What's your most important priority for talent management? And so this is where we saw that shift from attracting qualified talent, still very important, but 76%, over 3/4 said that retaining existing talent was the most important priority. And that was followed very closely by attracting qualified talent, so top two. So we know this, but what was most interesting is number 3, creating a strong culture. And I really think all of those things triangulate together. And culture is really foundational to your ability to attract and retain. We're working on a new report, and we'll talk a little bit about that later today. But the idea about how culture is so important to both attract and retain. So if we're digging deeper into those key priorities, we also asked, if retaining existing talents become more difficult, what are you doing in response? So I want you to think about what are the things that are working, and the slide I shared probably gives it away, because we found that in our list that there's a number of different things. And while there are some logical things that we know, we talked about the rising cost of everything, where you're increasing compensation, offering reward and recognition, enhancing benefits to stay competitive. The number one thing that CEOs are doing to retain existing talent is improving the company culture. And we see that this is a recurring theme, that it's such a priority. Culture is really the gravitational force that keeps the people you want, that's going to help attract those new people in expanding your workforce, and hopefully repel some of those that might not be a great fit. So that's what we're seeing, number one. And so that's something that we're going to dig deeper into to help SMB leaders understand what culture looks like and how you can drive that effectively. So now moving to recruiting as the number two priority is attracting qualified talent, we wanted to understand about the different recruiting tools and what's working best for CEOs in our survey. So we asked a number of things just to understand what are the top tactics that are working. I want you to think about what are some of the things that might be working for your organization. And we found, surprisingly, that amongst all the different things, and some of these things are part of your multi-channel, multi-platform recruitment campaign with postings on websites, recruiters, social media. These are all things that you need to have in the mix. But the number one most effective way, a recruitment tool, the way that qualified employees are found, is employee referrals. And that comes back and directly relates back to the retention metric. It relates to culture. When you have a really strong culture, when you have highly satisfied employees, they are going to be your number one source for bringing you new talent. So your best people are going to bring you your best people. And so employee referrals, 57% said that that's extremely or very effective. And so that's something, if you don't have a formalized referral program in place, that might be something to consider. And formalized, doesn't need to be intimidating, but it just starts with, are you actually making the ask of your employees? Are you making it easy for them to talk about your company, to share links to jobs, for them to even know the kinds of opportunities that are available? And are you actually giving them some sort of compensation? Are you recognizing that when they bring top talent into the organization, that they appreciate their efforts and rewarding them on milestones? So that's a very effective recruiting tool that we found. But not to say that you need to put all of your eggs in that basket, because I think now we're moving from a mindset of hiring and filling an open position to constantly filling that talent pipeline. And so just like you're filling your sales pipeline with qualified leads, we're seeing that companies are focused on filling their talent pipeline with potential employees and a strong
Ann,
culture. Oh, go
It's
ahead.
interesting. It's interesting because referrals is almost a proxy for culture, right? If people are
Yes.
feel strongly about the company they work for, if they're engaged and they have pride in where they work, they're much more likely to bring in people that will contribute and add to that culture. So essentially, that when you see referrals as a top success, an interesting data point might be for a CEO to look back over the last 12 months. How many of your new hires are referrals? And think about that as a proxy for the level of engagement and engagement in your culture you have with your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one way that you can measure engagement. So there's a lot of different ways, outside of your traditional engagement study members. But if, one of your top sources for qualified candidates is from your employees, and that's a good indicator that you've got a pretty strong culture.
Great, thanks. Well, let's step forward then, and we'll get to our next decision factor, and that is customer engagement. Selling into a slowdown. The reality is, and our data shows us here, that we've now seen seven consecutive quarters where revenue expectations, excuse me, has fallen, right? That means there's fewer people buying less stuff, right? And again, this is what our community is saying. So obviously we're seeing this slowdown show up. So how you sell in a slowdown has to be different than how you sell on the upside of the business cycle. Remember, we're in what ITR would call the phase D, or the deceleration towards the bottom, the phase D of the business cycle. What's happened is buyer behaviors have changed. How people buy, irrespective of what you sell, where and how you sell, those behaviors have changed. You might be seeing longer sales cycles. You might be seeing more finance involvement, more people asking for, what's the return? How is this going to save money? It's typical you'll see more shoppers than buyers, meaning people will look longer, they'll look deeper. They will look without having a budget or a timeline to make a decision. So identify and understand how your buyer behaviors are changing as their businesses slows as well, and their wallets get tighter, just like yours are, just like ours are. That means that your selling behaviors have to adapt. That means that as a salesperson, how they connect with your customers, however that is, even in an e-commerce environment, how you connect to your buyers is important. I believe that in every economy, the right answer is always get closer to your customers. In a down cycle, when we're in a slowdown, it's even more important. And I say that because your customers are hurting too. Your customers are experiencing a slowdown for the demand for their goods or services, whatever their capabilities are. You know, they're looking for ways to manage cash flow. They're looking for ways to be more efficient and effective in what they do and how they do it. So their buying dynamics are different, and you need to recognize what those are. Excuse me, sorry. You need to recognize what those are and adapt their game, because by helping and partnering with your best customers in a downturn, they will reward you when it comes back up again. By partnering and creating that sense of partnership, you not just deepen the relationship, you build a layer of trust that will be that's foundational for future growth. So understand their buying dynamics are different and get closer to them than ever before and partner with them. I would also suggest to you this is a unique opportunity to engage those targeted competitive accounts you've always wanted to get into but could never quite crack the door. Why? Because once you've secured your customers, once you've built, you know, your fortress around your customers, your competitors may not be treating their customers as well as you're treating yours. Your competitors just might be squeezing their customers even more. This may be an opportunity when that competitive account you've always wanted is vulnerable. And this is a great time to go in and talk about and demonstrate how you're helping your customers through a slowdown. This is an example of how selling behaviors have to adapt, how we have to move and evolve from how we sold when things were prosperous on the upside of the business cycle to now on the downside, how buyers have changed. What that means is you got to change the message, right? It's not about prosperity and growth and all the things that we'll see this time next year. Rather, it's about operational efficiencies and cost containment. How do your capabilities help your customers and your potential new customers or competitive account customers? How do your capabilities provide those efficiencies, that cost containment, that ability to manage in a more efficient way, whatever you're doing? You also might want to think about the different types of sales skills you might want to sharpen. You know, all our professional sports teams go to training camp before they start their season. And they do that to practice the fundamentals. Well, sales has fundamentals as well. What are the sales skills that are more important in a slowdown than they might be in an upturn? Well, one is return on investment selling, being able to create a tangible dollar value for the impact of the goods and services you provide to your customer. Reference selling. Trust is at a premium in a downturn, right? People that are making decisions, and there's some decisions that have to be made. People are still buying stuff, but they're going to trust someone who they've been referred to. Think about you do the same thing with references. So reference selling becomes a real important component. And then negotiation skills, right? Everybody's trying to save a buck. So being able to negotiate and the ability to position value versus cost is a huge skill to have in working with folks when things are tight right here. So again, as we think about from a customer engagement standpoint, we need to change how we sell, because how our buyer behavior has changed, and everything we do in sales is all tied to what our buyer behavior is. And we always think about the fact that the customer is at the core of everything that we do. So with that, let's step now into our next decision factor, and that's business operations. As we think about business operations, that's how your business operates, which is unique to every business based if you're in manufacturing or transportation or business services or healthcare, whatever that is. What is common across all of our members is technology. Technology is common because everybody spends money on technology. So we wanted to talk, when we talked about operations, the decision factors about how you're transforming and protecting your data, because we believe the future is data and you have to protect your future. And this comes from, again, we know that CEOs are in the business of making decisions, but leadership's the art of execution. It's what are you going to invest in and how are you going to bring that to life in your organization? And as Ann described before from projections, and we'll ask these questions again in December, so please look for our email and participate in our survey, our Q4 confidence survey. But when we asked that question, we found that technology by a landslide was the single top decision, single top area of investment. And that's not a surprise. It was the issue. It was a top topic before as well. It's technology is a change agent. It's a change agent of our generation. It's changed everything about our business lives. It's changed everybody about our personal lives. Technology is a driver for this generation. I often say that when history looks back on this period of the human journey, they will equate the discovery of technology right up there with the discovery of fire, the wheel, steam, internal combustion engine, electricity. This is a human event. One thing we know is that everybody spends money on technology. So across all our members, everybody spends technology. And I thought this was interesting that you see about two-thirds, a little bit less than two-thirds of our members spend between 1% and 5% on technology. I think we need to accept the fact that we will invest and continue to invest in technology as time goes forward, because it's only going to continue to improve and advance. I often say that where we are with technology today is equivalent to the 1920 biplane. We have that much more to go and that much more quickly to do with this. And it's a powerful force multiplier for small and mid-sized businesses, because now the applications, the capabilities, the integrated components allow small businesses and mid-sized businesses to have the advantages that big companies used to have in their ability to manage, to access, to leverage, and to utilize data. And that's why technology is such an important part of our business. Think about your customer data. Think about your product data. Think about your manufacturing data, if that's relevant, your financial data, your employee data. Our businesses live on data. Data is the blood of the modern organization. And the technology is the nervous system that allows that to flow. I don't think that analogy even works, but anyway, I'm sorry. Where does technology provide value? Well, this is from our digital transformation study, and this was a group, we call them digital pioneers because a very small group qualified to be advanced in terms of their use and their investment in technology. But the top value drivers were productivity and efficiency. It's how can technology do things faster, better, quicker, more accurately than humans can, right? And we saw that from the advent of the calculator, where you would punch the buttons and pull the crank and it would calculate the numbers, to spreadsheets where human error accounted for 3 to 8% errors on every document. That's just a statement of fact. To now technology's ability to quickly compile, add, compare, and present numbers. This is the power of efficiency that we see with technology. But look at this next layer. This next layer is all about connecting to customers. It's how do I get closer to customers? How can I use technology as an advantage to know more about what's important to my customer, to know more about what their issues are and how my goods or services address that, to know more about my customer and how and why and what they buy, to know more about my capabilities. This is why technology has become such a powerful change agent in business, and where we see people seeing this investment and seeing this value. And what this led us to is a report that we just recently published called Digital Transformation. And it's something I've been working on in my brain for a long time. I was with Gartner. If you know Gartner, it's IT, research and advisory. Excuse me, I've known Gartner. I worked at Gartner as a Gartner analyst. This concept of transformation has been in my mind for a long time. But it was really a way to think about what we've gone through is a digital transition. Meaning we've all transitioned how we've done things in the analog world into a digital format, right? You know, the Rolodex, the index cards, how we used to keep track of our customers, our contacts and their phone numbers. Then we moved that to a contact manager on a PC. And now it's integrated into a CRM system. But all we've done is we just migrated that analog way of doing it into a technology platform. Digital transformation is about changing how we think about technology, where we allow the technology, the platforms, the applications we buy to dictate the workflow and seek to capitalize on what technology can do versus what we want to do. It's clear that technology is a path forward. It's reshaping business in every way. I thought this was a really interesting bit. These are CEOs that strongly agree from our study that technology was reshaping industry. It's key to survival and growth. It's reshaping business practices and business model. It's reshaping the workplace and culture. And yet just 12.4% strongly agreed that they had a well-defined digital business strategy. Now, again, another 37% agreed, but my point here is that there is tremendous opportunity for us to transform, and that digital transformation takes place first with our attitudes, but also with taking advantage of what we have. And what this kind of leads to is 5 truths about technology. This is just some concepts that we wanted to put together to share, and that is that, one, we need to get rid of accept the fact that technology is only going to accelerate. The advent of 5G, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence are going to change the rules once again in terms of what technology can do for us. We need to expect to spend, right? We saw that 2/3 are spending between 1% and 5% of revenues. In our data coming into 29, 61%, almost 2/3 of our community was going to increase, not just maintain, but increase their investment in technology. So expect to spend it, and guess what? It's not going to be cheap, right? Transformation will be hard, and it's going to take longer. This is a true leadership challenge, because when you transform, when you change, It's about what people have to do that's different. It's about the fear of losing what they have and the uncertainty of what they may or may not have in a future state. Look, nobody likes to change, but transformation demands change. And it begins with a digital first mindset coming from the CEO. And it's still about people. At the end of the day, it's a human world. I think that artificial intelligence, I think robotics, I think they will drive the efficiency and productivity, but they will not replace humans because humans can uniquely create, collaborate, and connect with customers. So it's still a human world, and the technology always has to be an empowerer too, not an eliminator of humans. And that leads us to our last and one of the scariest parts of this is cyber. It carries risk, right? Your data is your business. And I would suggest to you that just like you put your money in a bank and you lock your doors on your car, you need to protect your data with a higher level of concern, because a cyber attack can take you down as sudden as a heart attack. And I literally could spend the rest of the afternoon sharing countless stories from people in our community who this has happened to. Like we said, Ann said, we like to ask questions. Has your company experienced a cyber attack or threat in the past 12 months? 27% in our most recent ask, it was up from 24%, are aware of having an attack, knowing that 50% of attacks people aren't aware of. There are people out there who are aggressively and unrelentingly trying to get your data and to ransom that data. So to help with this, we created a report, Cyber Threats and Solutions for Small and Mid-Sized Businesses. We tapped into 3 of our amazing speakers, Michael Markaluk, Ken Barnhart, and Mike Foster, to help us from different aspects of this. And the suggestions coming out of this, are that one, you need to assess, first of all, the strength of your cybersecurity. How strong is it? Is it even there? Do you have a system? In some places we've seen as high as a third of members have no cyber strategy at all. You need to create a layered defense. This is not just about buying technology, and we identify in this. It's about people, process, and technology. The weakest link in your cyber defense is your people. John Podesta and the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, that was where he clicked on a bad attachment and infected the system. A human was the weakness in that link. You need to bring awareness and training to your people. Process. Well, there's a definite process to this. How you back up and where you back up your data. How frequently you change your passwords. All of those annoying updates you get on your phones and your computers, 85, 90% of that, those are all security patches to make sure that the technology you have that protects and defends you all the time is current and up to date. Why? Because the hackers are always looking for a way around. They're always trying to find a way underneath, over, through, however they're going to do it, they're going to do it. And then, of course, technology. Accept the fact that you're going to spend 2 to 7% of your IT budget on cybersecurity for the rest of your life. Just accept it. Call it a cyber tax, deal with it, move on, because you can't afford to be shut down for 10 days with no data and have to spend money you hadn't allocated to get your data back. We suggest insurance. You can mitigate your legal risks and your financial risk with insurance. You can't mitigate the credibility hit you will take as a leader and the brand hit that your company will take in its market if you get taken down. If you have to be that CEO that goes out to your customers and explain, yeah, hey, listen, we lost all your data. You're not going to replace that. And engage with an expert. This is far too complicated. It's far too important for you not to engage with a cyber expert. And you'll want them not just to help assess where you are, but to work with you constantly as threats change and evolve and move. You have a doctor, you have an accountant, you have a lawyer. You need this level of expertise. And that's why we think this cyber threat is such an important thing. When we first did this study, I was appalled that almost 2/3 of our community was unprepared for a cyber attack. And I've just made it my personal mission. I'm going to be annoying about this, but to always raise awareness to this. Because once you've heard this message and once you now know that this exists, there's no reason not to do something about it. It's a choice, it's a decision, and only you can decide what's right. But I would suggest to you that this is just one of those things that you need to do because the alternative is sudden and severe. All right, so enough doom and gloom. Let's step into business finance, KPIs and rate of change. We work a lot with ITR Economics. They presented all of our VESs or have them most recently, and they use all this data. Their data is wrapped around rate of change. Your 3/12 and 12/12 rate of change, I like to think of it as your business blood pressure, right? Your KPIs are your heartbeat. It tells you what's going on right now. It's your blood pressure that tells you the volume, the velocity, the force of your blood. That's what rate of change is. Rate of change is your business blood pressure. So Ann, I'd love you to step us through your thoughts on KPIs and rate of change, please.
Yeah, thanks. And as you mentioned, it's really the velocity of change in the key metrics, and it gives you some visibility to things that you might not see. So while you might track, hard metrics like revenue or something that's really critical to your business, some people might have a leading indicator of customer inquiries or sales pipeline, something like that, that indicates the future. But really, it's the velocity of change. And when you can start to see when your growth is slowing, because if you just look at your growth and say, well, I am growing year over year, but maybe my growth is slowing, that's the velocity that we're looking for to say that, we're starting to see something taper off. So when we think about how to effectively create your rates of change metrics, I think that the first piece is really to select the metric that's most meaningful to your business. One or two, a lot of people might focus on revenue, but there might be some other indicator that's most critical for you to really understand the velocity of that change, and then add in the trend lines. And it's a pretty simple calculation. As Joe mentioned, our members are looking at that, but it's basically a rolling variance from the last quarter as an aggregate and the last year as an aggregate. And so it's a rolling calculation, but really focusing on those KPIs that are going to define your success. And then also understand external benchmarks. So our CEO Confidence Index is effectively a rate of change as well. So trying to understand that the change over time of CEO confidence and the different factors. But if you're in a different industry, if you're in a manufacturing business, for example, there might be some very specific external benchmarks that you can understand their rates of change to say, is our velocity different than what's going on in the industry? And that might indicate a problem. So those external benchmarks are really important, and the idea of capturing that change over time. Connor Lokar is one of the economists that speaks on our VES circuit, and he says the benchmarking aspect of measuring this is what's most important. So you can understand, is your velocity of change different than what's going on in the market? I talked about 312 and 1212, basically looking at rolling quarterly totals and rolling annual totals, because that might tell you a different story. So it's going to give you two perspectives on the same data. So calculating both of those is very important. And lastly, once you've done that, you've focused on the metrics, you've calculated these rates of change, the last piece is really, how do you adopt processes to make this part of your organization? So how do you make sure that you're vigilant with capturing that data? How easy is it to do that? I'm thinking about the reporting and transparency in your organization, and how to react to those trends. So often, if data might be looked at in a vacuum amongst a leader or a leadership team, but how can you make that data transparent and have conversations with your employees? We talked about culture, but transparency, having a culture of transparency, these rates of change might help drive that. And as Joe mentioned, is business blood pressure and rates of change. The personal story that I have is that during when my pregnancy, they measure your blood pressure every time, and my blood pressure at one point dropped. And if you look, or increased, I'm sorry. And if you look at blood pressure, it was probably fine for someone else. But what they were able to look at is the trends over time of where my blood pressure should have been, and to know that this was a problem for me. And so just think about, you're able to see when the velocity changes and it's different, it's unique, it's an indicator of a sign of trouble for your business. That's why it's so important to identify the key metrics and these external benchmarks so you can really see ahead of when it actually happens to be able to react and respond.
Thanks, Ann. It's really easy to do too, because everyone has their data. You just calculate it in 312, 1212. And what's really powerful about it is, while we're in a slowdown, the slowdown in and of itself suggests opportunity. Because if you can identify when it is that your business is at the bottom and beginning to accelerate, that's the time to fuel the investments. That's the time to step on your business accelerator and accelerate into that upswing and be ahead of the folks that you do that. So that's why this is such an important and easy thing to do. And as we begin to think about this time next year, when hopefully we're on that side A of the business cycle, knowing what that means for your business is a really powerful decision factor. Thanks, Ann. And that leads us now to leadership, our seventh one. And you've heard culture come up a number of times as we've been speaking today. But our concept here is that culture has emerged as so critical right now. It was selected as the top priority for CEOs coming into 2019. And as Ann said, we think about this as your organizational gravity. It's that unique and unseen force that holds and keeps your great employees connected to you. It's that unseen force that ejects and expels people that don't fit or no longer fit or choose not to fit with your culture. But most importantly, it's a gravitational force that will attract and pull people to your business. As the next generation of workers, the Gen X's and the Gen Y's begin to, the millennials and the Gen Xers now coming in, or the Gen Y's rather, as they now come to the workplace, they're looking for more than just a paycheck. They expect to be paid fairly for what they do and have a career path, but they want to be part of something, and that's culture. Culture is the only unique differentiator that you have. I can copy your business, I can steal your customers, I can take your people. I cannot copy your culture. Only you can create that culture. It was interesting we asked this question because we believe that culture is critical, especially in this environment where there aren't enough people out there. Everybody's looking to hire. 65% of our CEOs strongly agreed that culture was critical to performance and success. Another 60% strongly agreed it was an organizational priority. Yet just 16% felt they had an appropriate strength of culture. Now, behind that was another 30, 35, 36% of folks who agreed to it. But my point here is that culture is a unique opportunity for you to evolve and develop your business in ways that maybe you hadn't thought of before. There is a culture that exists in your organization. And anytime you get a group of humans together, culture will emerge. The question is it a conscious culture? Is the culture one that you are creating, you are reinforcing, and you're driving through your organization? Because again, if you think about it, it's what's going to keep your people attracted to you. But I'm willing to bet that 80% of the people that work for you live within 30 miles of your organization. So what's your culture? What's it look like in the marketplace? You know, if brand is to customer, then culture is to employee. What's the brand of your culture out in the marketplace where potential workers are? That's where culture becomes so powerful and is so critical in this time where there's simply not enough people. And I'd like to bring this together with a story that maybe you've heard before, but it's about the three bricklayers. And someone came up and asked them what they were doing. The first guy said, "I'm laying bricks." The second guy said, "I'm putting up a wall." But the third man said enthusiastically, "I'm building a cathedral." In your organization, how many bricklayers do you have? How many people are just punching in and punching out? How many people are actively maybe, eating away at the organization a little bit? What are these people doing when you're not in the office? And by the same token, who is building a cathedral? Who understands the grand vision, the mission, the vision, and the purpose of what your organization exists for, and how your culture is the power that's driving your business? That's why we think culture is so important. That's why we want to close with this as we think about the 7 decision factors that CEOs need to think about as they make decisions in 2019 and beyond.
All right, thank you so much, Joe. And we'll get to some questions if there's any and in a few minutes, but just wanted to share that this is part of our research, and our mission at Vistage Research is to be the SMB leader's most trusted resource for research data and the expert perspectives on the issues, topics, and decisions of both business optimization and leadership enhancement. And our research has provided us with the ability to create what we call the Vistage decision model. So when we ask those questions about the key decisions that you're facing over the next year, each December we ask that, and we've been able to take that data now 3 years in a row and create this model. And this is not a model for how to make decisions, rather the kinds of decisions you need to make. And it really starts with you as a leader. How do you show up every day? What's your attitude? What are your beliefs? What's your character? The ABCs of leadership. What are the attributes you possess, the competencies, behaviors? Then that's complemented with the next ring of how you actually lead your organization, the processes and disciplines that you use, from setting the organizational culture that's so important that Joe just talked about, through to your mission, vision, and purpose, aligning your strategic planning, and then aligning your resources. The next layer is optimizing business. And this is where we really see some of those key decisions. We talked about the top 10 decisions and with the hiring, recruiting and sourcing topping the list. And when we look at all of the 3,700 responses that we got to be able to synthesize those in different categories, we see that there's 4 clear areas that leaders are trying to optimize their business, starting with talent management, something that's so important, and that's been the top decisions. That's been the category of top decisions for the last 3 years, followed by customer engagement, business operations, and financials. So really this decision model, it's a way to categorize the kinds of decisions you should be facing. And as you apply the instincts that you have, the judgment that you get from your knowledge and expertise and the perspectives that many of our members choose to get from Vistage, this really becomes kind of a Rosetta Stone for the decisions that you should be facing. But I would also pose this as kind of a lens that you can use to actually look at any decision you make, because there's going to be implications. If you're making a decision around growth and expansion, if you're going into a new market, well, guess what? If you apply, this lens to those decisions, there's going to be customer implications, there's talent implications, financial implications for the infrastructure you need for that expansion and your investment. But we primarily use this decision model to understand what's in the hearts and minds of CEOs of small and mid-sized businesses. And we've also categorized our research to make it really easy for you to find. So when there's a topic that is of particular relevance, it's easily found in the Vistage Research Center. So for our members, it's on myvistage.com/research-center. And for everyone else, vistage.com under the Research and Insights tab. And you can see some of those categories I just talked about. And that's really how we're organizing our content to make it easy to find. And speaking of easy to find, you'll be able to download Decision Factors 2019 and beyond. We have the report that some of the insights we shared today are based on. And within that report, we have recommended actions for each of these 7 decision factors. And this, as Joe said, is really designed to help guide your decision making for, the last few months, finishing the year strong, but going beyond the end of 2019 and your strategic planning for 2020. So before we leave you today, I just wanted to talk about some upcoming webinars that might be coming. We have KPIs and the 4 core decisions that increase profits. And so when we think about data-driven decisions, we talked about rates of change and the importance of metrics. So Stephen King, CPA, is going to share some of those key findings and his recommendations for how to make data-driven decisions. That's on Friday, November 1st. And then on Friday, November 8th, we have Candace Morden from Insperity, who's going to share 4 key strategies to retain top talent during times of change. So again, connecting back to the fact that 76% of CEOs said that retention is their most important talent management challenge. So I hope you will join us for those sessions. And if there are no questions, then I am going to wish everyone a happy Friday. Thank you.